songwriter,
The photo is aging, droplets of sudden red.
Producer, composer, band leader, recording studio honcho, and the founder of Create Interesting Music, which is a mentorship program which helps creative guitarists develop into full-fledged artists.
I have a question on sort of electronic music composition on
Yeah.
one hand, and I have something that we could do today on the other hand. But look, maybe we'll start out with the first, since your prior thing was on composition. So I've done a lot of sound editing mainly for movies, right?
Oh,
And
cool.
Sound editing for movies, the main thing that I've done in that is sort of edit the sound or edit the video to match the sound. So sometimes it's like matching cuts on beats, various things of that type, right? But it's not really, and even when it's been sort of like mixing the music, it's been mixing in the music or mixing out the music, but not mixing to create music itself.
Yeah, totally.
So one of the things I was thinking about when you were just mentioning it is, and it is, it's sort of different than what I've done, but I think could be interesting is, so I want to make more electronic music, maybe sampling things in the guitar, maybe sampling things in the voice, and creating tracks from that.
Yeah.
But the concept of beat and rhythm, I wonder how that sort of plays into it, and because beat is something that's repetitive. So oftentimes, let's say you sample something, and it's not really something that is in any of the editing that I've done because the music track was already created.
Yeah, totally.
Recreated music track and editing video to it, as opposed to editing the video track itself. How does one think about putting things to a beat in sort of creating electronic music? I mean, do you have to basically repeat it every measure, and is it a very repetitive process as a result of that, or is there some other way to think about it?
Oh yeah. Well, I guess there are a few different like layers to that response. The first is technical, just like how does it work?
Yeah.
And then from there are different types of aesthetic questions. One of which is like, yeah, like if we have like a beat that's going, how much do we want to just let it be what it is, and how much do we want to change it or add stuff as the track continues?
Yeah.
And there are technical things there, and it's also an artistic question. And so I'll show you some really hands-on stuff to start, and then
give me one more thought that just came to mind, because I think I've even composed songs, because when you're singing or when you're playing something, you often improvise and try to compose something. So I've even composed sort of like melodies or things like that just on the fly. But that still seems quite different when I'm thinking about it. So I've approached it from like both sides. But it seems different from laying it out on a computer.
Totally.
To actually create the beat system. Interesting. Sorry, I didn't cut you off.
Oh yeah, no, it's all good. Yeah, I mean, for somebody with your background, I feel like working in like a recorded way could be a really interesting way to start unlocking a lot of things, because I mean, as somebody, like, I do video editing like for my own, like just for stuff related to the course, and then I had like a video editing side hustle for a while, basically to pay for my studio before I had enough stuff in my studio to like rent it out to people. And so that's something that I'm fairly familiar with. I'm not like pro level, but I have some experience, and I was able to pick up on it very quickly because it's so close to audio editing. Like, I mean, granted, I'm working with images, and so the technical things are different than like, oh, like I'll change this beat here. But basically, it's like you're looking at the slider going across all of these different files, and they create some sort of experience. You're clicking and dragging things and turning things up and turning things
Yeah,
down and stuff. So I think that you might find that a lot of expertise really ports over. Um,
sure.
yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just open up this program called Ableton.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so when I open up Ableton, it looks like this. Ableton has an interface that it tends to be pretty confusing at first. I'd say the first 10 hours or so of using it are a lot more difficult than any of the hours that come later. And the first hour is way harder than the second hour, and the second hour is sorry, yeah, the second hour is way harder than the third hour and stuff. So there's just some kind of like I've experienced some just like shock when I was learning it. But after like a week, it was like amazing. Um, so basically, I'm just pressing tab here to shift between these two different views for the screen. And this is for like live performance. So we're not really going to use this at all. So I just press tab and then I go over here. And then, and this is going to get to drums in a second, but I'm just going to break down like what we're looking at. Okay. And so then this is kind of like video editing software in that like if I press spacebar, we have this like slider that's going
Yep.
across. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so then we can see time markings down here. And so basically what's going to happen is that we'll have audio files, that take up space and we press play and the slider moves across the space.
Yep.
And then something else that we can do is turn on like a metronome, which is what this button does.
Okay.
And so this is what it sounds like with a metronome. Yeah. Okay. So that's basically now you can hear the clicks, you can hear the pulse.
Okay, so I can't hear the clicks. Are there clicks going on?
Oh, there were, and then I paused it. I'll press it again with the clicks. Oh, okay. If you're not hearing that, I have to change something in my settings.
Maybe I need to turn off original sound for musicians. You
Oh,
have
actually, it's not you. It's just that it's something that's Ableton specific. How about now?
great. I hear it.
Okay, cool. Okay. So then something that we can do that's different than video editing software. At least I only know Premiere, so this is just
Yeah.
different than Premiere. But you can edit tempo. So let's say we want 140 BPM instead of 120. Then we'll see that all like the placement of the bar lines change. Oh, actually, the placement of the bar lines doesn't change, but we can see how the time markers change.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is
That
what it.
that 140. That's the beats per minute.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if I press spacebar here and we just hear this click at 140, we get this. It's like a little bit faster.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So now let's say that we want to program like a beat. So I go over to drums and it's just kind of cool. There's this whole column here with all this stuff, and I can go to instruments and just like, there's just tons of sounds that I can
Yeah.
like work with or whatever. But drums are kind of their own specific thing. So then I can literally just cycle through all these different drum sounds. And some of these, I mean, the ones with the numbers are like classic, very artificial sounding drum machines.
Uh-huh.
There are some that sound more realistic. Which one is it? Coral Kit is, yeah. Yeah, so we get all these different sounds. Okay, so I'm gonna pick just a classic drum machine, which is an 808.
Yeah.
Okay, and so now we're not gonna worry about what this does yet.
Yeah.
But basically, okay, I'm just thinking about how to make this approachable. So far, is this feeling okay? Like, are you feeling overwhelmed or
So
anything?
far, it's feeling great. So imagine
Okay.
I wanted the 808 core kit, and I want to lay it out for like the whole song, or
Yeah.
because in some sense you can't put it anywhere. In video, you can probably put it anywhere, but here you sort of want to put it on the beat, at least if there is a beat, or maybe that
Yeah,
would be.
totally. Okay, cool. So that's what I'll show you how to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so the way that I go from not having anything to having something is that we have this track, and this track's going to be the 808 core kit. And then you see this little red button here.
Yeah.
That means that this track is primed to record.
What
So
does
when
that
so it means that when I press record, stuff is going to show up on this channel
Okay.
or on this track. And the way that that works with drum machines, like it's like, well, let's see. I'm gonna try something really quick and just
Sure. Yeah.
yeah, let's see. Okay. Okay, so with other keyboards like or other MIDI instruments, I would be more likely to actually perform something while it's recording. But I'm just gonna hit record here just so that I can get this thing to happen. You'll see what that is. So this circle button is record. So I press record, and I'm going to turn off the metronome. Okay, and so you can see there's this box that's forming. I'm going to stop recording. And then basically what I can do is I can just expand or make this box narrower, and that the significance of this will become clear as we see what this box does. So when I click on this, I can click on this other thing, this other square down here. And this is where, like, again, like I'm giving you like a lot of information, but we're going to switch from this, which I'll explain in a little bit, over to this, which is what people call like the piano roll. And what the piano roll basically just means is like where you can like program in notes.
Okay.
So let's say that we want to program in a really basic beat, and we want a kick drum on 1 and 3, and we want a snare on 2 and 4. This is what we've got. I'm going to bring it back down to 120. It's just a little too fast. It's not too, that's all relative. Just for some reason, I just wanted to hear it at 120. Okay. So now we've got kick, snare, kick, snare. Let's say that we wanted to add hi-hats in there. I'm just putting them on the 8th notes because each of these boxes is a 16th note.
Sure. Oh, cool.
So then we get that. Yeah. Okay. And so then one of the cool things about this being digital is that I can just like copy paste it. So let's say that we want 4 bars.
Check that out.
Yeah.
So you'd like very rarely do the copy and pasting in that way in video, but in audio, I imagine you probably do it a lot because you got to fill like 2 minutes worth of this stuff. You can't sit and click the beats, click the drums for like 2 minutes worth of measures.
Totally. Yeah. So copy pasting is definitely a really useful, is a really useful thing here. Yeah. Okay. And so then there's a question that emerges from here, which is if we have a drum beat.
And this, okay, and just conceptually, so when you shifted from that left tab to the right tab on the bottom, these are the instruments that are in the 808 core kit.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So when you picked the collections and when you picked the 808 core kit, it gave you a sampling of what it could sound like, but these are actually the instruments within it, and you can put a beat of each of these and lay it out in this other tab. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, and then actually while we're on this, I'll just show you what this other tab is for. So this is just like programming in like MIDI information, which means basically that there is a button, and that button triggers a sound.
Sure.
And then this other thing is more like audio signal. And so what that means is let's say we want, for example,
like filters and things like that.
Totally, exactly. Yeah, so we could do that. I'll just like throw on like a reverb here. So this is just if I throw on some really big reverb. And then I can make it.
Yeah.
So I can have it be more or less reverby. I can also add, like EQ. Let's say that we want to get rid of the low frequencies. We can do this. So there's that. Now I'll turn these off. But so basically what this does is it actually processes the audio that's coming out of the MIDI. And then something that I'll do, sometimes it's related to audio and MIDI, is I'll actually be like, okay, so right now, if I'm throwing effects onto this, I'm throwing effects onto every sound in the drum set. Let's say that I only want reverb on the snare. What I'll do is I'll just copy paste this track. And then I'll get rid of everything in the piano roll other than the snare. And now I have this track that's only snare. And I'll throw reverb on that one only. And so we might have something that sounds like this. For example,
Sure.
Yeah, there might be a more elegant way to do this in this program in Ableton, but I kind of just started working this way and it's working really well for me. And I don't really need a more elegant solution. So
and then can you copy that? So right now that's the block is 4 I don't know, it's 4 measures long, but maybe it's 4 8 measures long, however many measures.
Yeah, it's 4 measures, yeah.
And the timeline is not only in time, but it also measures at the top. And let's say you wanted to copy that uh, like for more.
Hmm. Yeah, so I can copy paste the whole
Can
thing.
you just drag the end and will it reproduce? Or that's not how it works. You got to actually
Yeah,
copy and
so
paste
this
the
one
whole.
won't because it'll just like because basically in the sort of piano roll for this track, after that point, there's nothing. So when I
Yeah.
zoom out, but what I can do is I can either copy paste this stuff within the piano roll,
Hmm.
which will look like this, or what I can do is I can shorten this, right? And just copy this whole file and then paste the whole thing. So now this is, this is two different boxes
Yeah.
instead of one box.
And so if you make an adjustment in one, it wouldn't necessarily apply to the other.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
I got you. Okay. So in that sense, it's similar to the video stuff. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So this is basically like this is the core of how sort of drum programming would work in a program like Ableton.
Hmm.
And then I think the concepts map to most digital audio workstations. Like Ableton is a program that's called the Digital Audio Workstation. There's another one's called Logic that's also would fit under the same category. I don't really know the insides of Logic so well.
Yeah.
Um, so the idea of like click here to do this will be different, but the basic concept of like you can program a beat and you can click, and you can like copy one track that's just the snare, get rid of everything that's just the snare. Like all of that is conceptually similar. It's just the interface is different.
Sure. Interesting.
I have a couple more kind of follow-up things after this that we
Yeah,
can.
yeah, sure.
Okay, cool. So then the next question is like, if we're programming a song, sorry, if we're programming a beat for a whole song, how do we do that? And so if we have this empty screen right now, or not empty screen, but we have this and we have like nothing else, then there's a question of like how we go from here to having a full song produced. And so usually I'll have if I'm doing this, I'll have like a framework for the song that's written, or I'll have like a demo, I'll have like a chord progression and I'll have lyrics,
Hmm.
or at least I'll have a melody. And so what I'll do is often I'll start off by having a very simplistic drum pattern. That's just enough to kind of like tell me where the beat is, basically.
Hmm.
And also I often like to start with a really simplistic drum pattern that like provokes some idea. And so I've realized that if I program a certain type of drum pattern, it's going to spark my imagination a lot more than other types of things. So if I give myself, for example, something that sounds like a 70s rock beat, like I'm not going to have a strong creative response to it, just because aesthetically it's not super close to what I'm thinking about right now. But if I program like a really simple beat that sounds like music I've been listening to recently, then I'll be a lot more likely to be like, oh, I want to add this, I want to add this, and it'll spark something. So it's kind of just
Hmm.
like a side tip. But yeah, so basically we can say, for example, like, oh, we want, I'm copying two, now we've got four, now I'm copying four beats, now we've got eight, eight becomes 16, and so on. Exponential growth. Okay, cool. And now we have this beat going on for 4 minutes.
Hmm.
Okay. So what I might do is just track a rough version of the guitar part to this. And depending on how things go, maybe I'll just track the first verse for the guitar. So I'll just play the first verse through, and then maybe I'll listen back to it and be like, that's not even really good enough for a demo part. Maybe I'll play it again. So I'll play it again. Maybe I'll play it a third time, but I get something that's workable.
Okay.
And then maybe I'll play the guitar part for the chorus.
Do you have a guitar part just to put one in here?
So I don't really have my recording set up. If I were to record acoustic guitars right now, because I have my acoustic here, it would go through my computer, but I can show you a work in
Yeah,
progress.
sure. Well, if you want, just to give a sample of like, what how one might put a guitar part over this. So let's say there's a beat going on now. So I follow you up till now that there's a beat going on. If you just throw on, I mean, it doesn't have to be it's not necessarily going to be a great song, or it's not supposed to be a great song. It's just like a sample. How would you put on like a vocal or a guitar part on top of the beat?
Oh, just in terms of the interface.
Yeah,
Oh,
just in
well,
terms of
now
the
I've
code.
clicked
Code
away
it,
to a work in progress. Um, okay, well, so basically what you would
If you
do.
go to a work in progress, the problem is like you might mess it up while showing me. But if you just want to copy like something just to show me how it actually works.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, yeah, okay. So basically, I mean, this is a full work in progress. I get really into adding new tracks. So this
Yeah.
is like going from like a difficulty or a complexity level of like one to like 11 out of 10. Like I've
And do you find
given
that when you have like 48 tracks that your computer runs out of memory or something, or like, things can handle all varieties of stuff?
my computer handles it pretty well. I have a pretty new computer and I got it with the intent to do stuff like this. So
Sure.
yeah, it works really well for
Okay.
me. But on my old computer, I used to run into more problems with it. And I changed computers in probably like spring 2022.
Got it.
Um, but yeah, so basically, what we've got, right? We have these tracks that are called MIDI tracks. And
You have
so
one of the you have one of the M series Macs?
I believe so. It's a MacBook Pro.
Oh yeah, you must have. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and it's not one of the ones with the little slidey touchscreen. It came after that.
Sure.
Yeah. Um, okay. So basically we've got this drum set. We can see here it's like piano roll. And this
Hmm.
is a layer that's just hi-hats.
Okay.
Okay. So then let's say we want to add guitars. This might be way too complicated for where we're at. Maybe for now I'll just go back to a beginner live set. Um, and then we can go back to
You
this
can
to
really
show
put
you.
any, I'm just more saying like,
Oh yeah,
let's
totally.
say you had the drum thing, and now we want to put on,
Totally.
how do we put on a something on it?
Yeah. Okay. So let's bring back this beat really fast. It takes a second. Saving time by copy pasting hi-hats.
Now you have 18 beats or 33 beats worth of stuff.
Oh, sorry, one more time.
So now you've created 33 beats worth of.
Yeah, of just this beat looping. And it
Yeah.
could even just I'll just get even more going. Okay, cool. So the issue with recording straight into Ableton through my computer mic
Hmm.
is that there's like a lag.
Oh,
Um and so everything's going to be a little bit behind, so I'll just have to click and drag it into place. But basically what's going to happen is that right now, okay, so we've got MIDI tracks and MIDI tracks where you can just like draw things in basically.
hmm.
Like I drew in the beat. And then there are audio tracks, which is where you actually are recording audio. So I'm just gonna start listening to this beat. I'm gonna hit record. I'm just gonna try to sing something. Okay, so we've got that. And now we have this audio file and it's behind. So I know that I was singing with the beat, but because singing directly through into my laptop mic delays, what I'm going to do is just click and drag this so that this sound
Oh,
starts
interesting.
right where the beat sounds.
Cool.
It's not 100%. Okay, this is like now it's maybe that's okay. That's good enough for our purposes.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
So we've got that. And so we got our vocal take. We have a beat. I'll just put this here. And then I'm just going to grab my guitar, which is currently in its case. So I'll be like 1 second getting it
Sure.
out. Yeah.
Hmm.
Right. So now we've got um yeah, so I'm just arming another track for recording. But, I'm going to copy paste this. I don't know what key I was just singing in. I just kind of picked a note randomly. So let's just see if I could find that note.
Well, here's the question. Is it possible to slightly alter your, so let's imagine that you had and this is probably maybe one step later, but let's say you had the guitar, you had the voice, and you found that your voice was slightly off relative to your guitar. Could you edit that?
Yes. So there are a few different ways to do it. And Ableton doesn't have a great built-in auto tune, at
Uh-huh.
least as far as I know, and I'm pretty sure that that's the case. So basically, we have two different options. One of which is just using a pitch shifter.
Hmm.
And so what I did was I just got this effect that's called a shifter from where it says audio effects.
Hmm.
and I dropped it on this, which is the file where I was, or the track where I was recording my voice. And so here's what happens if I start playing around with the pitch shifter.
That's a cool effect in and of itself.
Totally. Yeah. And so let's say I wanted to move everything up by like a semitone. Just for example, that happens. So for now, let's just say that I want to bump it up. Like maybe I'm just very, very slightly flat. I can also bump it up by cents.
Yep.
So do you know what a cent is in tuning?
No.
Okay. So basically, do you know what a semitone is?
A half note.
Or like a half step.
A half step, yes.
Yeah, okay. So one semitone is 100 cents.
Oh, okay. So a cent is 1/100th of a half step.
Yes. And so here's what happens if I start playing around with the slider that lets me play with cents.
Very fun.
The pitch is still shifting, but it's like in a much smaller space. Okay. So what I might do if I wanted to fix the whole thing, if I realized I was just like 5 cents flat through this whole thing, because I wasn't singing along to any instrument, I was just picking notes out of nowhere. I could bump the whole thing up by like 5 cents.
Okay.
There is another program that I use that has like a free auto tune. And so what I do when I'm working on my vocals, if I'm doing something where I would want some degree of auto tune as like an aesthetic tool or just as a time saving tool. Like for example, if I'm like tracking sort of like choral harmonies where I'm singing like 16 parts or something.
Yeah.
It's not worth taking the time to make sure that all of those parts are perfectly in tune without auto tune. And so what I'll do is
you might have some portions of those recordings that are in tune, some portions that are slightly out of tune. So in theory, you could go and put a different filter in different parts, like have the filters fade in and have one piece go up 5 cents, one piece go up 10 cents, and like, or is that ever like a useful? That's probably very intricate and not that useful. I guess.
Yeah, and so that's the difference between using something like a pitch shifter as an autotune versus like an actual autotune plugin as an autotune. And so I work in another program called Reaper that I might have told you about, and Reaper comes with a really great, just kind of like built-in autotune. And so what it allows you to do, and maybe if we've got time, I can just show you. But to just summarize it really quick, there's like a manual tuning button, and so you turn manual tuning on, and then it just shows you where the melody or the line or the pitch is that's being played on like a graph basically. And then you can just draw in lines that are on equal tempered notes. And so for example, if I'm holding, let's say like a middle C with my voice, and I'm holding it for 8 seconds, it could be the case that when I start singing that note, I'm like 10 cents sharp, but then by the 3rd second of me singing that note, I'm basically in tune. But then at second 7, maybe it dips down a tiny bit because I was like running out of breath, and so my technique kind of faltered, And those are things that would be fixable if I was paying a lot of attention and I was singing and I was really, doing something like this. But if I'm trying to sing 16 vocal tracks and they're all going to be sort of like filtered, so they're just a very specific frequency range, then I'm going to put reverb on them and all this stuff like this. I guess this is a difference between being like a choral singer and being like a producer who's just trying to get a layer that's going to be part of a much bigger thing. I'll often just tune those things because it just the amount of time that it would take relative to the result of like using autotune versus not using autotune is like a trade-off that's not
But like if I wanted to do an a cappella piece and sing like the different parts myself, and then sort of put them on top of each other. Imagine I was trying to like recreate the Backstreet Boys. And so I sing a couple of different parts. I want to put them on top of each other. In theory, to get them all really well in tune, you could use the auto-tune plug. I mean, you don't have to, because I could also sing them all properly. That would be the other way to do it. But you could also use the auto-tune on each one, and then when stacked up, it sounds all in tune.
Totally, yeah. And then one of the things that goes on with the Reaper autotune specifically is that you can change like basically how long after the sound changes it takes for the autotune to kick in. And so if you want something that's really subtle and like not super noticeable, you can have like a longer amount of time for it to kick in. But then you just might have things that drift out of tune like a little bit.
Sure.
And if you have it be like instantaneous, like 1 millisecond or something like that. I think that's like the smallest time unit. It's like ms. I think that stands for millisecond.
Hmm.
Then it's going to sound super like robotic and digital. And so there's some degree of like turning the knobs a little bit to figure out
Okay.
how digital you want it to sound. And then there's also how much is it like a special effect versus like a tool. And so if you want it to be the special effect of like really on the nose auto tune, you'd have super pronounced auto tune where it's like immediate and you sound like a robot, you know. Um, and then it can also just be like if you're creating these vocal pads, you're creating these harmonies. I
Hmm.
might be more just like nobody's going to listen to these voices individually because of how they're going to show up in the mix. It would be impossible unless you're maybe using some sort of AI tool that separates out all these layers.
Yeah.
Um, but it's unlikely anybody's going to do that. And also,
Yeah.
I don't know how good those tools are right now anyway. So nobody's going to be able to listen to these vocal tracks independently. So I might auto tune those. But if I want a more naturalistic sounding vocal line where it just sounds like me singing, and you hear all of those imperfections of intonation that come with a person singing,
Hmm.
especially a person like me, where I've practiced a lot as a vocalist, but it's not like I've been a trained singer since I was 4. Like
Yeah.
there's some people who just like who have perfect or very near perfect intonation to my ears like all the time, and I'm not one of those people.
Hmm.
And so my intonation will just drift a little bit more than some people's, and it's
Hmm.
something I'm constantly working on. But it's also something that some people like it, and some people like it. Like people who like indie rock singers, you know, are going to be more likely to like a naturalistic sounding vocal take. And then meanwhile, if I were to do something like that, but on a song that sounds like a top 40s song that you'd hear at like a deli or something, that would sound a lot more out of place, you know? So there's like an aesthetic thing going on here too. So that's big picture. That's some stuff about intonation. And if you ever want to see like how I would just like tune a choral part, super down to show you that. But for now, should we also talk about tracking some guitar on
Yeah.
this?
Let's do that.
Cool. Okay. So this is kind of in B minor-ish. Okay. So I've got okay, so really quick, I'm just gonna title this demo vocals. And then I'm gonna
Now
call
you're
this
recording guitar into this.
yes. Okay. And so again, there's going to be a lag. And so I'm going to have to fix that. But if I'm using my actual, like, kind of more professional recording setup, there's no lag. So,
And the lag is because if you use the microphone in your guitar, I hadn't even thought about the lag actually. So, for example, I have an audio interface connected to my system.
mhm.
Um, does that reduce the lag? Like, what causes the lag?
um, I don't, I don't 100% know, like, technically exactly what causes the lag with the laptop mic. I know that I don't have lag issues with an audio interface. The most obvious explanation for me would be something like CPU or whatever. But if we actually hit record, there's this percentage thing that shows us how much like of our computer's capabilities we're using. And I'm not like a
Interesting.
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
It's literally like, there's just some lag. There's some lag in the system, and when you're recording, that lag will be there, and you can just get rid of that lag afterwards. It's not like a end of the world kind of thing. It's a well, you fix it, and then you can, or if you have a system that has really low latency, then you can have no lag or very little lag, and because yours is a pretty new machine. I would have thought, I would have entirely uninformed, I'd have thought, hey, with such a new machine, you're not taxing your machine with like recording a guitar, but even then there's lag if you're using the mic in the system.
Totally. Yeah, and so the thing is that when I was just recording here, I saw that like the percentage went up to 5, which is still very low. That's not enough to really expect latency. And so there's also a thing where when I record with an audio interface, I don't have any lag problems. So I think it actually has something to do with like how the laptop, like the internal like laptop mic connects to recording software like in
Yeah.
the computer, but I don't totally know from like a purely like technical like computer perspective. I just know that it's a problem that I don't run into when I'm using an audio interface, which is how I record when I'm actually recording, you know.
Gotcha. So, well, more of a reason to have an audio interface then. I always wondered
Totally.
why one needed one of those, and now I
Oh
know.
yeah. Yeah. Also, you can just being able to use mics is really
Yes.
important. Because like what we can get from a laptop mic is like nothing compared to what we can get from even a low end
Now,
record, you know, performance
you
recording.
can very easily tell the difference from your side between those two setups.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so I'm just gonna play a guitar part with this vocal part,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna record it. Okay, cool. So I just played some guitar. And we can see here that this is not really on the beat for the most part. I'm just gonna, I think this attack, and you can see here in the waveform how it kind of spikes.
Mhm.
I think that's gonna go there. But I'm just gonna listen to make sure. Okay, I believe that's where we want it to go, and then I'll just follow my ears. So what we're gonna do is drag this over so that this attack is pretty much on the beat, and then
Mhm.
these are behind. So sometimes the first note that I play will be a little bit off, but then my body will kind of like lock in with the beat. Okay, and that's still not looking great. And this is the problem with recording this way, is that you're never going to get good results. But I can get things that are going to be workable for this. But I would never
Really?
professionally
So,
record
but
this.
if you were recording sort of with the audio interface, then this would all be lined up, and then you sort of save a lot of time doing it that way.
Yeah, totally. And it's not only time, it's like quality because there's also the possibility that actually the delay is changing in this sound file. And
Oh,
so
the
it could be
delay
the
could be
case.
different at different parts of the sound file.
Yeah, because I'm seeing here I can line this one up, but then these are falling behind.
Hmm.
Not in a way that looks intentional, like not in a way that looks funky, but just in a way that looks kind of bad.
Yeah.
And so this is why I just never record through my laptop mic for any professional purposes.
I never
Sometimes,
knew that was an issue. Okay.
yeah, sometimes I'll record through my laptop mic specifically to avoid getting attached to the sound because there are going to be problems with it.
Yeah.
And so that means that there can't be a part of me that's like, oh, but I like it this way. Maybe I won't change it. It's like if I record through my laptop mic, I'm like, no, this is a demo. I am going to change this, so I can kind of force myself.
Sure.
Like I'll use it that way sometimes as part of like a process to prevent myself from getting attached to what I'm making, basically.
Sure.
But that more has to do with my own
What if I
psychology.
like record in my like iPhone voice recorder or something like that? Can that be brought in and sort of I guess that's a wave file. And that
Yeah,
can be brought in and just sort of synced up, or would that also have like a variable lag that you think that would have a variable lag?
no. So basically, the way that would work is that 'cause I have done that. I think the reason to do that would be for like if you want a sound that has the sound of an iPhone voice memo, which is not always bad. That's like if you're that like there are
That's an
artistic
aesthetic.
reasons to
That's
do
an
that.
aesthetic. So why does it have a sound? Because you can listen to it and it will sound like an iPhone voice memo. It will not sound like a professionally recorded track.
Totally. Yeah,
I mean, it's
exactly.
like an iPhone microphone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, voice memos. It's like if you listen to an iPhone voice memo over nice speakers, it'll still sound like an iPhone voice memo.
Gotcha. Okay.
And
Sure.
meanwhile, actually, I'll just show you. I think Sam would be fine with me sharing this. When I was talking to Sam earlier, she is now using my recording studio space, which is really cool. And I'll just show you what it sounds like when she recorded using my like some of the nicer microphones that are in my studio.
Oh, no sound.
Oh, okay. So far nothing is played. So I'll
Sure.
just double check. Share computer sound. Okay, yeah. Let me know if this.
Sure. I can hear your volume control. Yeah, now I hear it.
Yeah. So can you hear that audio and stuff?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So that's just like a nice microphone pointed at a guitar.
Okay.
And so the difference between that and what we're about to hear is going to be pronounced. Okay. So this is the way that this guitar part sounds. It's just much more it's like very flat.
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's see how they fit together. That actually doesn't sound that bad to me now as far as rhythm goes. Um, but for the sake of building kind of just like a mock-up track,
Mhm.
I'll copy paste this. And so what I did was I moved the beginning of this waveform or this like sound file
Yeah.
so that it begins on the third beat of the measure.
Okay.
And then I just copy pasted it to the third beat of the next cycle,
Yes.
which is starts at 5 measures in. So now we can listen to it twice. So now we've got that.
And to
Um,
record in another track, you just hit the red button, the red record button on a different track to record into that track.
totally. And so what I can do, I don't know if you can see the very top of my screen,
Yeah.
but oh yeah, where it says create and insert
Yep.
audio track. Okay, cool. So you just add another audio track, and I'll just make it the same color because I think this is a nice color. Okay, cool. And so then I can just add another guitar part. And so I'll just do that. Cool. So I just added another guitar part. I'm just going to make the waveform go where we want it to go,
Yeah.
which I believe is approximately here. And let's see what that sounds like. Excuse me. Cool. And then if I wanted to, I could copy paste, excuse me, I could copy paste that. So I know that
Yeah.
this shape starts on the beginning of the second measure of a cycle. So that'll start on measure 6 in the second cycle. Yeah, and so if I wanted to, I'll just shorten this.
Does
It's a little.
it auto align to the measure bar when you pick copy and paste? Or like how
Uh,
did you come
yeah, that's a
on?
good question. So it does not. So basically what I do when I'm going to move a sound file around is like, because I originally had this here. Excuse me, my voice is kind of breaking up here.
Sure.
If I had it here and I wanted to copy paste this and have this sound start in the exact same place,
Mhm.
I would have to find the halfway point between the second and third beats of the second measure of the cycle. And
Mhm.
so the probability if I'm working quickly that I'm going to get that wrong is very high. Like unless I'm like being super careful and paying a lot of attention. But if I'm on like hour 4 of a production session and I'm
Yeah.
just moving things around, I don't really want to have to think in a way that's like that fine tuning or that fine tuned. And so what I'll do is I'll just drag it to like the nearest easy point to find on a grid.
Sure.
And then later, the other thing about working this way is that later that means that if I'm mixing it or if I want to clean up the mix, I'm going to need to get rid of all this
No,
audio.
but let's say you want to copy that and you want to put it at at bar 8. How do you put it at bar 8?
Okay, so right
As
now,
opposed to as opposed to 8.1 or like 8
oh
point
yeah, yeah, that's a
7.
great question. Okay, so right now I've got the signal. It starts on beat 2. I've hit copy. So then what I would do is I just go over to bar 8, which is right here. I'm going to delete this one because that
Sure.
would be overlapping. And we can talk about how that actually works in Ableton in a
Oh,
second.
and so when you click there, it goes to the bar line, basically.
Yes, and then there's another option that's somewhere. It's snap to
So
grid.
there's a snap to grid. Okay, that's what I was basically asking. So
Oh
there's a
yeah, okay,
snap to
cool.
grid. So when you click there, it snaps to the eighth bar line. Now, if you
Yeah,
wanted to micro move it, you could take off snap to grid and like move it like 5 milliseconds forward, 5 milliseconds back. But
totally.
otherwise, you want the snap to grid on because you want it to show up on bar 8.
Yeah, and then I can just paste, and then it shows up on bar 8.
Sure.
And sometimes it can be cool as like a strategy to just see if you paste a part in a different place in the beat than you're expecting, what that'll sound like. So, for
Mhm.
example, let's see what this first chord sounds like next to the end of the riff. That's kind of
Oh,
cool.
cool. Yeah, that's kind of
Yeah.
cool.
And so that's actually more and more a way that I'll kind of just I'll try to break out of my muscle memory patterns with the guitar is just by combining things in different ways. And I'm sure there are some guitar purists who might be like, that's not real writing or whatever, but this is just a thing in production history. Like there's a production strategy. I'm a little bit like, because I just taught myself how to do all this stuff. I don't really know the names of a lot of these things in the way that somebody's like a historian of this would, but I think this is sort of called like chopped and screwed production, where you're just
Okay.
like dragging files around. But also, I read a lot, or I have read a lot, and I've listened to a lot of stuff by this artist and producer Brian Eno, and
Mhm.
he'll totally do stuff like this. Just like use digital like workstations to create different combinations of sounds and stuff, and just see what you
You
get.
might imagine that prior to digital workstations, it's very tough to do this sort of like nonlinear editing um, type stuff. But yeah.
Totally, and it sounded really different. I mean, things were just generally a lot less quantized, and so that type of stuff brings us back to like what would be called like music concrete.
Uh-huh.
And
What's
so
that?
like so music concrete. I'll drop this in our chat.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So music concrete kind of came out of like classical music.
Uh-huh.
And basically it was like some composers who were also working on this working at this one like radio station, I believe in France, um, that started to explore making music just with samples. And they were kind of the first people to do it. And so the idea of concrete was like actual concrete sounds that come from the world. And so one of the first music concrete pieces, maybe the first, was a piece that was just using train sounds.
Mhm.
Um, and so rather than writing for a violin, the composer could like work with an actual train sound. And so they were working with tapes. And so they'd like cut up bits of of tape that had audio signal on it and stuff like that. But yeah, working with that stuff in a way that was actually mapped to a pulse was like incredibly time consuming. And then this is actually one of the places where the Beatles are super groundbreaking, is because they were incorporating ideas from like musique concrète into their studio productions, like in the 60s. Because their producer was like really actively part of the band as far as the studio stuff would go. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of the origin of it. But then once digital technology comes around, things change like a lot. And so in the 70s and 80s, people start to use samplers. I mean, more so in the 80s than in the 70s, but I think there is some sampler based music from the 70s. And when you have a sampler and you have like, or a sequencer, which is going to like play samples on a grid, all of a sudden it gets
Mhm.
a lot easier to map this stuff to a grid. And so that's where a lot of things show up. Like that's where hip hop shows up. I believe my history there is kind of fuzzy, but I'm pretty sure that's where it shows up. And then also a lot of just a lot of 80s music that we associate with drum machines really comes from this technology that allows us to play samples on a grid because the machine creates the grid. Whereas before that, it's like if you're trying to create a grid with tape, you're literally like trying to create pieces of tape that are the exact same size, so that they're going to be played and it's going to sound like a pulse, which would just be, I'm sure that there were people who tried to do it in like the late 50s or
It was
early
like the
60s, but
50s, 60s type of situation.
yeah, but it'd be like crazy time consuming. Um,
Sure.
so there's some stuff about kind of the history of it. Yeah, okay, so I just want to get a little bit into how I might turn this into like a full track.
Sure. Yeah. See
Okay,
that.
cool. So, waiting for this Zoom options bar to get out of the way. I'll just slide this down, maybe. Maybe it's just going to disappear. There we go. Now it's gone. Now I can see everything. Okay. So let's say that we have a song. Um, Basically what we could do is be like track, with an audio interface so we don't have this weird lag, track the verse guitar part, for example. And let's say that's like 16 bars. So in the way that you just saw me record a guitar part, we just do that. But rather than just making up a part on the spot, I play a verse guitar part. So we get that. And then from there, maybe it's not a good take. We do another take. Maybe we want another take. We do another take. Well, at this point, when I'm tracking guitars, I'll actually usually double track or triple track, meaning like I'll record
Does
myself
that mean?
playing it. Oh, yeah. So double tracking means like when you have a part that's already tracked, but you record yourself playing that part again over it. So that when you're listening to it, you're listening to two performances of yourself playing the same part.
I see.
And so the effect of that is that it kind of like thickens the sound, because if we're just listening to one take, we're going to hear all of the details of like exactly where I strum that chord and exactly the way that I strum that chord, like how fast my pick moves across the strings.
Yeah.
Um, for example. And if we double track it, we're getting two takes of all of those little details on top of each other. And so the effect is that it kind of like thickens the sound. Like I can show you specific examples of double tracking.
Can you show me an example of double? Because so instead of playing the same guitar part just once, you play it sort of twice or thrice, like double
Totally.
tracking or triple tracking, and it gives the sound of like an orchestra rather than just an individual.
Yeah, I'll pull up this track again and I'll just show you what I
Or
did
is
with
it
the
like another way of
guitars.
adding reverb?
Um, there it could be a way to add reverb, but that's not the standard function. It's more like what you were describing in the first place. I'll just show you some double tracked guitars right now. Or maybe even like quadruple tracked or something. Just means more of the same. Also, that's why you see like a lot of my vocal takes here, like it'll be the same, nearly the same
Oh,
thing, but you can see the
and you're
waveforms.
actually performing it. They're slightly different waveforms. You're actually performing it three or four times, and
Yeah,
that'll give more like a thickness to the sound.
yeah.
Oh,
Okay, so these are, oh, we want some guitar parts that are active.
how do you know whether they're active or not?
So yeah, it's a great question. Okay, so it differs based on the digital audio workstation, but here
Mhm.
this is track 113, and you can see that this box is orange
Yes.
where my mouse is, and so if I click it, it becomes gray.
Oh, yes, that's right.
So if
Okay,
I click it again, it becomes orange again. And so if the box is orange, that means the track is active.
gotcha.
Okay. And then there's a lot of other kind of more complex production stuff that's going on here. What I'm going to do is grab all of these tracks. And so let's see exactly what this is. Okay, cool. So what's going on here is that I'm just gonna listen to one of these at a time, actually. What is this? Okay, so this is a little complex because these are very similar guitar parts that are actually different. So these are basically mono or maybe stereo recordings. Okay, this is a really complicated track. I'm just getting back into the headspace of what's going on. Okay, so these are each stereo recordings. This is just one guitar part.
Mhm.
And then this is another guitar part that's made to sound almost the same, but there are a few notes that are different. And so that's like a compositional strategy.
Mhm.
And so together you get this kind of cool effect. So this is almost like the spirit of multi-tracking, but it's not actually multi-tracking.
Mhm.
And then we've got another thing here. Ah, these are actually the same way. These are the same. This is the
Those are
same
the
thing
same.
as
So it's not really multi-tracking. That's like just putting the same one. And would that result in increased volume or
it's a lot of different things. I mean, in this case, the wider, the ones that are panned wider, the 50L and 50R
Mhm.
are they have different effects.
I see.
And so the effect is that as I listen around in the stereo image, there's a very crunchy, kind of more like compressed, slightly distorted version of the guitar that's super far left. And then if I turn my attention to like partway left, there's a cleaner version of the same guitar part.
Yep.
So this is like kind of advanced, like very digital sounding production strategies. I want to find a there's definitely some multi-tracking somewhere on this track. I think this guitar part's just like really complicated. Those are different mics on the same guitar. All right, what have I been doing this multi-track recently? It exists. Uh You know what? Maybe what I'll do instead is I'll just go back to the demo that we're working on. I'll just show you what happens when I multi-track something. Just because like this project is really, really complicated. Okay. Okay, so we've got this. I'm just gonna see if I can memorize this part. Okay, cool. And just for the sake of my own memory, I'm going to get rid of this one just because this is going to mess with my ability to remember this one.
Mhm.
Okay. And so, yeah, let's just see what happens. Cool. So now we've got two different guitar performances of the same part.
Yeah.
Then,
And you have to still get rid of the time lag on the second one, basically, right?
yeah. And so that's one of the ways that like the time lag thing's really going to cause some problems because so much of it has to do with like all the different nuances and how your time is just different the second time than the first time.
Yeah.
And all that's going to really be obscured by all of the like the lag stuff. But
Sure.
we'll see here just what it sounds like when we've got two different takes of me playing the same part. Hopefully they're like in sync and also if I'm clicking and dragging manually, it's always an approximation because the actual lag is probably, like I'm making up numbers here, but let's say that this is like let's say this is like a quarter of a second. The
Mhm.
lag might be like 0.27835 seconds or something.
Sure.
And that's not I can't quantize that. Like I mean maybe if I spent like many hours on it, I could get something that's really close, but it's it's like really for multi-tracking, it's really not great. But we're still just getting the basic idea of like what is multi-tracking. So check this out. And so here's what it sounds like when I just solo these tracks. And do you know what I mean when I say solo?
When you just only play that track?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then also, this is a small thing. I'm seeing that this waveform's kind of clipping in some places. And you know what clipping means from video editing and stuff?
Yeah, clipping is when the sound is going above like the max threshold of your speaker system.
Yeah. And so what I'm doing is just turning this whole thing down
Uh-huh.
so that the volume
You
levels are
know that
more
it's
equal.
clipping?
One more time.
How do you know that it's clipping?
Because the waveform was like
Oh,
hitting
it's
the
beyond the top. Yeah, okay.
yeah, and I was hearing some digital distortion. And the thing is that the digital distortion is going to be like baked into this sound, so I can't get rid of it, but I can turn it down so that it doesn't poke out as much.
Okay, sure.
Cool. Okay, so now we're just going to listen to these two guitar parts at once. Okay, now we're just going to listen to one of these guitar parts at a time. Versus this one. Just, like for example, so on their own, they don't sound that different, but when we put them together, we get these really small differences. And it almost sounds like it's like phasey in this case. Yeah. And some of that maybe has to do with how I lined it up digitally, but I've also gotten kind of phasey effects from double tracking before. So on its own, that's not that crazy an effect. Sometimes it'll sound really cool with distorted guitar parts because like every time that you strum a distorted guitar, you get all these like harmonics and overtones and stuff. And so when you start multi-tracking distorted guitars, you're going to really thicken the whole sound palette because you're getting different combinations of overtones and harmonics and stuff like that.
Yes, right.
Okay, cool. But something that we can do that is cool that we can do with acoustic guitars is we can create a stereo image. And so what I did here was I moved this like 30L and I moved this 30R. And the 30L versus 30R thing, Ableton's weird in that the farthest you can go left or right is 50. And the other digital audio workstations that I've worked with, it's like 100% left, 100% right.
Okay.
And so to me, this means 30 means 60%.
It's just a different measure but it's actually the same output. It's just measuring in units of 50 as opposed to units of 100.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
cool. And so here's what happens when we pan these things. Let's listen to this with everything else. And then this is only left. Now, let's say, for example, we wanted to try to create a little bit more shape. So we copy paste the whole thing. And the third time, we only have the right guitar. Okay, cool. So we're already getting narrative, right? Because the first time it's wide, the second time we get left, then we get right. And so it feels like there's something that's happening.
Yep.
And I guess by my standards, I have a really wide sense of like what narrative is. And some people mean it to literally just be like, the cat went to the store or whatever. But for me, it's just when there's transformation happening in time, maybe it's an abstract narrative, but I would call that narrative. And so then the fourth time, we get both left and right. And I'm adding in that other guitar part here. Sure.
Oh, that's cool.
For example. Yeah. And so this is how from pretty limited parts, we're able to create a whole section. And so I'll just hit play again and we'll get to listen to it. Yeah.
You really use the left and right, which is another concept of I guess that's sound design. So you can put certain parts in one side, certain parts in the other side, and even if it's the same guitar that's actually playing it, it gives this feeling of a band, really, in some sense. So if I were doing, for example, the "Take Me Home, Country Road," right,
Yeah.
and trying to recreate the original recording, I could, in theory, play like a couple of these different parts separately and put them together in the panning, and well, you don't know who played it, and you don't know whether they're on the right or whether they're on the left. But through the editing, you get that effect of the full. And I guess is it the case that when they were actually doing it in the '60s, they would just record the band all at once, playing it together? Is that was how they did it, or did they would they have done something more like this, but in a different kind of machine?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so in the 50s, I think it was pretty straightforward. Like you just put a mic down or put a couple mics down and record a band.
Yeah,
I think the 60s are where it starts to get more sophisticated or people start to explore different techniques. I think if you listen to the way that records are engineered in the year 1960 versus the year 1970,
yep,
I mean, depending on the record, you'll probably hear a much wider range of techniques being used by 1970 than 1960 because the 1960s were really the decade where this really took off.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah, and then from there, or even in the 60s, it kind of comes down to it can really even not only by like a style of music basis or like a band by band basis, but really on a track by track basis.
Hmm.
Sometimes even on a section by section basis. And the way to learn more about how all this happened beyond just like listening and to music and being like, oh, what's that? Like, why is that there? Why do these drums sound so different than everything else on the record? Or, things like that. It's really interesting to read about how bands recorded things or how different producers worked. Because I was reading something recently about how, like, I guess on the White Album, or listening to somebody talking about this, like on the White Album, the Beatles were trying to never do anything the same way twice.
Hmm.
Um, and so the way that every track was like constructed in the studio is different than the track before it. To the point where, like, I think it was maybe with Dear Prudence. I wish I could remember who I was listening to talk about this. And it was just like a really brief kind of passing thing. And there's some track, I think it's Dear Prudence, where the Beatles were just like, or George Martin specifically, their producer, is like, what happens if we just crank the high frequencies all the way up and get rid of a lot of the low frequencies? And the drums just sound really weird and different as a result, you know? And so it's really just a constant process of discovery.
Hmm.
And it's a constant process of experimentation and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, by the 60s, like there are people who get into like multi-tracking, and so like yeah, there are some strategies where you record a band, you record a take the whole way through. I think most of Bob Dylan's music is that way. Like all those 60s records where he's playing guitar and singing, he's there playing guitar and singing. Maybe there's some tracks where somebody else is playing guitar. There are a few tracks where like authorship of who played guitar and what is disputed, but it was recorded as a take. It wasn't recorded like it wasn't like assembled. But then when
Yeah.
we get to other bands who do the studio stuff, like I mean, I feel like people often talk about the Beatles like a little bit too much, maybe, but this is a case where the Beatles really were like one of the leading forces because they had the budget to do this. And I mean, not many at the time, this was all very expensive. You needed a
Sure.
lot of really expensive gear, so they got to do it because they had a ton of money.
Sure.
But like yeah, like their producer was much more like, let's try to do things this way. Let's work in like ideas for musique concrète. Like let's sample an orchestra. Let's sample the sound of like a something crazy with a piano. Like I'm this isn't it, but like it's something like what happens if we like drop a piano from some height, or like what
Yeah.
happens if we like record the same piano chord like 8 times and like stack it on itself, like just all of these crazy recording experiments that
Hmm.
make that music sound really distinctive. And so for me, like as a music maker, kind of as like a producer,
Hmm.
the I think I developed a preference kind of in my like late teen years, probably like 17 through 19, for music that sounded like it was being made, or at least for studio recordings, music that sounds like it was being made by one sort of like producer, or like by one like sort of DIY, like meaning do it yourself, sort of like auteur, where they'd like play all of the instruments and mix it and have this really distinctive approach to doing everything.
Yeah.
Um, and what I didn't understand at the time is that that's like a way more time consuming way to create music. That
Sure.
it's like, because like if you're a band and you go in for an afternoon and you have your songs and you play your takes and you record the takes and maybe later you do some guitar overdubs or whatever, like that's an afternoon. Whereas for me, getting to a demo of a track is like a 7 hour studio session,
Sure.
which is just a different, and I'm okay with that.
Perfect.
But
You're doing all the pieces yourself.
I'm doing everything myself. I'm writing as I'm recording, and so I'll record something that'll go back and change something else, and so it leads to results that I like, but it's just really time intensive. But I like the results, and I can't get the results that I want by working in a more kind of standard band format. And then that also means a different like kind of economic model for how I work, because like bands will like save up money and then go into the studio, whereas I have to have a studio.
With something like guitar lessons, like I want to play that Robert Fripp solo, or like this is the sound I'm going for, versus with this class it's more about finding your sound, which I think is extremely important if you're trying to create like meaningful music that connects with people but also with yourself. Like none of us are blank slates. Everybody coming into this course identifies in some way or another as an artist or a musician who, again, hasn't necessarily unlocked what they want to unlock.
I'm currently opening up a limited number of 45-minute strategy calls. On the calls, we're going to 1, get serious about your goals, 2, identify what's holding you back, and 3, make a roadmap together for how you can move forward and really achieve those goals. And after that, if it's a fit, we'll talk about working together. So if you're ready to grow as a guitarist, as an artist, and maybe even as a human being, there should be a little button below where you can click to book a time. So bring your story and we'll do the rest together. See you soon.